If no one fixes the ZX-9's first code, the car will overheat at high speed and threaten young racer Leo's life. That was Isaiah Brooks's final warning before CEO Victoria Davenport kicked him out of the $1.5 billion apex velocity in Charlotte at 10:47 p.m. Victoria called the 32-year-old single dad an uneducated vandal, ignoring that this genius worker created the car's energy code to feed his daughter, Ruby. This cruel firing forces Isaiah to fight for justice against the management's disrespect and lies. Will Victoria see her mistake when a terrible crash almost happens, or will her pride hide the truth forever? The glass doors of Apex Velocity Dynamics slammed shut behind Isaiah at 10:47 p.m. Rain hit his face like small needles. He stood on the wet sidewalk for a moment. His hands still smelled like engine grease and burnt copper wire. Above him, the building glowed gold and blue, 40 floors of glass and steel. Inside, warm light spilled from Victoria Davenport's office. Isaiah did not look back. He pulled his jacket tight and walked into the storm. He waited 20 minutes for the number 14 bus. Water dripped from his cap onto his boots. The bus at last came, hissing and groaning to a stop. Isaiah paid his fare and found a seat near the back. He watched the bright office towers of downtown Charlotte fade behind fogged glass. Slowly, the city changed. Tall buildings gave way to old houses. Streetlights grew dimmer and farther apart. This was Gaston, the part of Charlotte that tourists never saw. He got off at his usual stop and walked the last 3 blocks alone. His apartment building had a broken light over the front door. It had been broken for 8 months. Nobody ever fixed it. Isaiah climbed the narrow stairs to apartment 4B, careful to skip the loose step that creaked. He did not want to wake Ruby. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. A wobbly wooden table sat near the kitchen. On the wall above it hung a hand-drawn blueprint, yellow with age. It showed the frame of a hybrid engine block, sketched years ago by a man named Arthur Davenport. It was the only souvenir Isaiah kept from his old life. Isaiah opened a metal tin on the table. He counted the bills inside in a slow way. $114.50. Ruby's asthma medicine cost more than that. Her next refill was due in 6 days. Isaiah closed the tin and rubbed his eyes. He looked at a small toy helicopter sitting on the counter. He had built it himself, from old engine parts 2 years ago. Ruby loved it more than any store-bought toy. Isaiah smiled a little, even though his chest still ached from the night's shame. 7 years ago, Isaiah was not just a repair worker. He was the quiet genius behind Apex Velocity's biggest breakthrough. Back then, the company was smaller, hungrier, and led by a different kind of leader. Arthur Davenport, the founder, had discovered Isaiah working nights at a small garage on the edge of town. Arthur saw something no one else noticed. He saw a young mechanic who knew engines the way musicians know sound. Arthur brought Isaiah into a secret research team. Together, they built something called Apex Pulse, a new way to manage power inside a hybrid race engine. It was the heart of a machine called the ZX-9. Isaiah worked 18-hour days back then. He barely slept. He barely saw his wife, Naomi. Then it all changed one terrible night. Naomi fell down at home, while Isaiah was locked in the lab, testing a new circuit. By the time he got the call, it was too late. He never got to say goodbye. That loss broke something in him, and it also woke something up. He made a promise at her funeral. He would never again let work steal him from the people he loved. So Isaiah walked away from the lab. He walked away from stock options, from fame, from the credit he deserved. He took a simple job as a repair worker instead. It let him leave every day by 4:30 p.m., just in time to pick up Ruby from school. He kept his old skills quiet. Nobody at Apex Velocity today knew who he used to be. Nobody, that is, except a dead man's secrets and one old friend named Winston. Now, standing in his kitchen at midnight, jobless and soaked from the rain, Isaiah felt the weight of that old promise pressing down on him. He had broken the rules tonight. He had sat in the CEO's office and gotten fired in front of half the engineering staff, all because he tried to fix a mistake no one else could see. He walked in a soft way into Ruby's room. She was asleep, one small arm hanging off the edge of the bed. Isaiah gently tucked it back under the blanket. He watched her breathe for a long moment. Whatever happened next, He told himself. She came first. Always. He turned off the kitchen light and lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere across town, inside a locked garage bay, the ZX-9 sat silent under a canvas cover. Its engine held a secret flaw, and in less than 48 hours, that flaw would be tested at nearly 200 miles an hour. Isaiah closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily that night. Morning came fast. At 7:15 a.m., Isaiah stood at the stove, flipping an egg for Ruby. 2 slices of toast waited on a plate beside it. Ruby sat at the table, swinging her feet and humming a song from school. The small radio on the counter crackled, with the local station, WBT. Big news out of Charlotte today, the announcer said cheerfully. In just 48 hours, Apex Velocity Dynamics will run a live speed test of its new ZX-9 hybrid race car. Executives from Vanguard Automotive will watch in person. Sources say a $500 million merger deal depends on the results. Isaiah's hand froze over the frying pan. The egg began to burn at the edges. The announcer kept talking. The car will be driven by rising star Leo Ramirez, just 21 years old, and he was already turning heads on the racing circuit. Isaiah's stomach dropped. Leo was not just some driver to him. He had watched Leo grow up racing go-karts at the local track, back when Isaiah still worked in the lab. Leo used to wave at him from across the pit lane and call him Mr. I.B. Isaiah taught him how to read a tire gauge before Leo even had his driver's license. Now Leo was about to sit inside a car with a fatal flaw, and almost no one knew it. Isaiah knew the danger better than anyone alive. The ZX-9 ran on a system he designed years ago, called the thermal closed-loop filter. It kept the hybrid battery from getting too hot during long, fast runs. But Marcus Vance, the current head of engineering, had stolen an early, unfinished version of Isaiah's code. That version was missing the safety filter fully. If the car pushed past 12 laps at full speed, the cooling system would lock itself down to protect the battery. Without the filter, the backup gas engine would keep burning fuel, with no way to cool itself. The result would be very bad. Fire. Loss of control. Maybe worse. Isaiah scraped the burnt egg into the trash and started a new one. His hands were shaking slightly. "Daddy, you okay?" Ruby asked, looking up from her cereal. "I'm fine, baby girl," Isaiah said, forcing a smile. "Eat your breakfast." But he was not fine. His mind raced through every terrible outcome. He thought about calling Apex Velocity right then. He thought about driving straight to the track and demanding someone listen. Then reality crashed back down on him. He had been fired less than 12 hours ago. If he showed up at Apex Velocity now, guards would throw him out on sight. Worse, Marcus Vance would use his power to have Isaiah put in cuffs for trespassing or accused of stealing secrets. A crime record would mean no job, no income, and maybe losing custody of Ruby altogether. He set the new egg on Ruby's plate and sat down across from her. "Surely their workers will catch it," he said soft to himself. "They have to. They have dozens of experts over there." But even as he said it, doubt crawled up his spine. He knew just how proud and rude Marcus could be. He knew how easily pride could blind smart people to real danger. His phone buzzed on the counter. It was a call from Miller's Garage, a small repair shop on the edge of town. They wanted him to come in for a meeting later that day for a job fixing car frames. $14 an hour. Steady hours. No danger of ever seeing Victoria Davenport's face again. Isaiah stared at Ruby, who was happily eating her eggs and telling him about a butterfly she saw at recess. This was what mattered. This was the whole reason he walked away from that world in the first place. "I have to think about my daughter first," he told himself in a soft way. "Leo has a whole team of experts protecting him. I can't risk my freedom for people who just called me a crime." He picked up his phone and, with a heavy heart, deleted the old contact number for the Apex Velocity Engineering Department. It was a number he had not used in 7 years, but somehow, deleting it still felt like closing a door. He told himself it was the right choice. He told himself Leo would be fine. Deep down, though, a small voice kept whispering that he was wrong. The meeting at Miller's Garage lasted only 20 minutes. The manager seemed friendly enough, but the whole conversation felt hollow to Isaiah. He answered questions about brake systems and frame alignment on autopilot. His mind kept drifting back to the radio broadcast, to Leo's smiling face, to numbers spinning past a danger line. After the meeting, Isaiah did not go straight home. His feet carried him instead toward Oakwood Cemetery, a quiet green hill on the edge of the city. He had not visited in months. He walked past rows of old stone markers until he reached a simple gray headstone. It read, Arthur James Davenport, founder, engineer, friend. Isaiah knelt down and brushed a few fallen leaves off the stone. I don't know what to do, he said in a soft way. You always knew what to do. He'd tell you to trust your gut, a rough voice said behind him. Isaiah turned, startled. An older black man sat in a wheelchair a few feet away, parked beside another grave. He wore a faded Apex Velocity jacket, the old logo, from years ago, before the company changed hands. Winston, Isaiah said, surprised. I haven't seen you in years. I come out here every Tuesday, Winston said, rolling closer. Keeps me close to the old man. He was more of a father to me than my own daddy ever was. His eyes studied Isaiah with care. You look like a man carrying something heavy, son. Isaiah sat down on a nearby bench and told him it all. He talked about the shame in Victoria's office, about being called uneducated, about the stolen code, about Leo, about the deadline ticking down. Winston listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded in his lap. When Isaiah finished, Winston let out a long breath. Arthur didn't build that company to make killing machines for a paycheck, he said, his voice low and steady. He picked you, out of everybody, because you knew something the fancy workers never did. Every line of code sits on top of a human life. I know that, Isaiah said. But if I go back there, I could lose it all. Ruby needs me. Winston reached out and gripped Isaiah's hand. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man his age. If you stay silent, and that boy gets hurt, you'll carry that weight every day for the rest of your life, he said. That's not the kind of example you want to set for your little girl. The words hit Isaiah like a physical blow. He thought about Ruby watching him, from the sidelines someday, learning what kind of man he really was. Winston reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out an old portable hard drive. A small hawk symbol was engraved on its metal case, the same symbol Arthur used to stamp on all his private files. Arthur gave me this, before he passed, Winston said. Told me to hold onto it until the right moment came. I think that moment is now. He placed the drive gently in Isaiah's palm. These are his last notes. Might help you. Might not. But you deserve to see them. Isaiah stared down at the small device, feeling its weight far beyond its size. Thank you, Winston. Don't thank me, the old man said, already rolling himself back toward the path. Just do right by that boy on the track, and by yourself. A light breeze moved through the graveyard, rustling the leaves overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed steadily, a plain, ordinary sound against such a heavy moment. Isaiah sat alone on the bench, while longer, letting Winston's words settle deep into his chest. Isaiah watched him disappear around a bend in the graveyard road. Then he looked down at Arthur's hard drive again, turning it in a slow way in his fingers. Something told him his choice had just gotten a lot more complicated. Isaiah got home at 5:30 p.m. He dropped his jacket on a chair and plugged Winston's hard drive into his old laptop. The screen flickered to life. Rows of folders appeared, each labeled in Arthur's neat handwriting style. One folder caught his eye right away. It was named ZX9 Ownership. Inside, Isaiah found a digital will, dated just months before Arthur died. His hands trembled as he read the words on the screen. Arthur had legally gave 30% owning it of the ZX9's core technology to Isaiah Brooks. There was also a warning, written in Arthur's own voice, about a young worker named Marcus Vance, who could not be trusted. Isaiah sat back in his chair, stunned. Part of him wanted to celebrate. A bigger part of him only cared about one thing. Leo was still in danger, and now was not the time to think about money or owning it papers. He called his neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, and asked if she could watch Ruby for a few hours that evening. She agreed without hesitation, the way good neighbors always do. Isaiah kissed Ruby goodbye and told her he had an errand to run. He caught a late bus towards Charlotte Motor Speedway. The paddock area, where teams prepared their cars, sat behind tall fences on the north side of the stuff. Security lights lit up the parking lot in a cold white glow. Isaiah's heart pounded as he approached the west gate. In his jacket pocket, he still carried his old repair worker badge. He had never turned it in after being fired. He held his breath and swiped it across the scanner. The light blinked green. Somehow, in the chaos of his sudden firing, no one had removed his access yet. Isaiah slipped through the gate at 8:15 p.m. He moved quickly along the fence line, staying low and out of the main lights. He found Leo's Gave parking bay, marked with a small paper sign. The ZX-9 sat under a black cover, silent and still. Isaiah pulled a small notepad from his pocket and wrote quickly. Leo, if the engine RPM goes above 14,200 for more than 4 seconds, the cooling system will fail. Ask them to check the water pump pressure right now. Signed, IB. He folded the note tightly and slid it into the crack of the driver's side window. His hands were sweating despite the cool night air. Just as he turned to leave, bright security lights snapped on across the lot. An alarm siren began to wail through the paddock. Isaiah's pulse spiked. He ran toward the back service exit, his boots pounding against the pavement. 2 guards shouted behind him, their flashlights sweeping the darkness. Isaiah squeezed through a gap in the fence, tearing his jacket sleeve in the process. He kept running until the sirens faded behind him. He did not stop until he reached the bus stop 3 blocks away, gasping for breath under a flickering street lamp. He had crossed a line tonight. There was no going back now. The next morning, Marcus Vance found the folded note tucked in Leo's car. His face turned red with anger as he read it. He crumpled the paper and stormed into his office, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. Marcus ordered extra guards to patrol the paddock around the clock. He also picked up his phone and called Isaiah, his voice sharp and cold. If you show your face anywhere near this speedway again, Marcus warned, I will have you put in cuffs for destruction of company stuff. Do you know me? Isaiah said nothing and hung up the phone. A few hours later, his landlord called, with even worse news. Marcus had somehow reached out to him, claiming Isaiah was causing public disturbances. The landlord nervously explained that Isaiah's lease would not be renewed at the end of the month. Isaiah sat on his couch, feeling the walls closing in around him. Every choice now seemed to cost him something precious. But not everyone at the speedway sided with Marcus. Leo had read the crumpled note before guards took it away from him. Sitting alone in the driver's locker room, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he still knew by heart. Mr. Isaiah, Leo said in a soft way when the call hooked up. They told me you got fired for vandalism. But I know you. Is it true? Is there really something wrong with my car? Isaiah closed his eyes, weighing his next words with care. Leo, listen to me, he said. Watch the oil pressure gauge closely during lap 12. If it moves more than 3%, you stop the car right away. Your life matters more than any contract Victoria wants to sign. Leo went quiet for a moment. I believe you, he said at last. I always have. That small trust gave Isaiah something to hold on to. But he still had no way to watch the race from inside the track. Instead, he built his own solution using spare parts from his workshop closet. He hooked up an old radio antenna to a shortwave radio box, hoping to catch stray telemetry signals broadcast from the car during testing. It was not perfect science. It was desperation dressed up as engineering. But it was the only window Isaiah had left into what was about to happen at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Victoria Davenport had not always been so cold. As a girl, she used to sit on her father's lap in the old garage, watching him sketch engine parts on scrap paper. Arthur used to tell her that numbers only told half the story. She forgot that lesson someplace between business school and her first boardroom meeting. After Arthur passed away, the company's board of directors doubted a 26-year-old woman could run $1 billion business. Victoria fought hard to prove them wrong. She buried herself in sheets of numbers, quarterly reports, and Ivy League helpers. She learned to trust diplomas and titles more than gut feeling or experience. Somewhere along the way, she started believing that people without fancy degrees simply did not belong in her world. It was easier that way. It let her avoid seeing the real cost hiding behind every cold choice she made. Marcus Vance knew this weakness in her perfectly, and he used it whenever it suited him. Race day arrived at just 10 o'clock a.m. The Charlotte sun beat down on the asphalt, pushing the heat level to a brutal 98 degrees. Heat rose off the track in shimmering waves. Every extra degree meant extra strain on the ZX-9's cooling system. Inside a glass VIP suite overlooking the track, Victoria Davenport greeted her guests with a confident smile. She wore a crisp, white-tailored suit, every inch the picture of corporate success. Beside her stood Jean-Pierre, the sharp-eyed rich businessman from Vanguard Automotive, along with his team of helpers. Marcus Vance stood close to Victoria's side, calming everyone in the room. "Every system has been tested and verified," he said smoothly. "Today, we're going to shatter this track's speed record." Miles away, inside apartment 4B, Isaiah sat hunched over his laptop. Ruby sat beside him on the couch, in a soft way coloring in a notebook. Isaiah gripped her small hand for a moment, before turning back to his makeshift radio box. Static crackled through the speaker. Then, faintly, numbers began appearing on his screen. Engine data, speed readings, temperature levels. The ZX-9 roared to life on the track, and Isaiah's homemade system caught fragments of its signal. The small apartment felt too quiet except for the hum of the old laptop fan. Isaiah's shirt stuck to his back, with sweat, though the room was not warm. Ruby's crayon scratched softly against paper beside him, a small, steady sound that somehow kept him grounded. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past on the street below, rattling the window glass for just a second. Lap 1. Lap 2. The numbers looked stable so far. But Isaiah's eyes locked onto one particular line of data, the battery heat level curve. It was climbing faster than it should, pushed hard by the punishing heat outside. By lap 12, Leo held the lead at 192 miles per hour. Exactly as Isaiah had predicted, the oil pressure gauge inside the cockpit began to flutter. Leo did not forget the warning, and eased his foot slightly off the gas pedal. Through his radio headset, Marcus's voice cut in sharply. "Leo, do not slow down. Vanguard is watching that speed clock right now. We need you at 14,200 revolutions per minute through this straightaway to close the deal." Pressure from every direction pushed down on the young driver. Leo waited, then pressed the accelerator back down. The engine screamed as it hit 14,250 revolutions per minute, blowing past the danger line Isaiah had warned about. On Isaiah's screen, the coolant heat level reading spiked into the red zone, hitting 285 degrees Fahrenheit. The system locked down automatically to protect the battery pack, just as he feared it would. With no safety filter installed, the backup engine kept burning fuel, with nowhere for the heat to go. At nearly 200 miles per hour, flames erupted from the rear of the ZX-9. Overheated hot oil had leaked straight onto the exhaust system. The car spun wildly out of control, tires screaming against the hot asphalt. It slammed into the concrete barrier at turn 4 with a sickening crash. Inside the VIP suite, the entire room fell silent. Victoria's crystal glass slipped from her fingers and broke on the marble floor. Champagne splashed across her costly heels. Marcus stood frozen, all color draining from his face. Smoke poured from the wrecked cockpit. Leo was trapped inside, and the automatic fire suppression system had failed, jammed by a conflict deep inside the broken code. For one long, terrible moment, no one in Charlotte moved at all. Track workers stood frozen near the pit wall, their headsets crackling with panicked voices. A young flagman dropped his checkered flag and simply stared, hands pressed against his helmet. Jean-Pierre rose in a slow way from his chair in the VIP suite, his face pale with shock. Somewhere behind Victoria, an assistant said soft a prayer under her breath. Then, deep inside the car's damaged frame, a small machine-made relay clicked into place. It was a part Isaiah had in a soft way added months earlier, long before he got fired. It did not appear on any real blueprint. The relay instantly cut all power from the battery pack, stopping a much larger explosion before it could start. Rescue crews pulled Leo from the wreckage within minutes. He suffered a few cracked ribs and minor burns on his hand, but he was alive. Doctors later called it a miracle. Isaiah watched the numbers go flat, and safe on his screen. At last, he let out the breath he had been holding. The $500 million deal fell down within the hour. Vanguard Automotive threatened a lawsuit, accusing Apex Velocity of reckless and unsafe engineering practices. Facing possible crime charges, Victoria demanded immediate access to the car's black box data. What she found stopped her cold. The recorded heat level warnings matched, word for word, and number for number, the handwritten note Marcus had crumpled up and thrown away. A janitor found the note later in a trash bin near the engineering office, and in a soft way saved it. He had almost thrown it away, without a second thought. Something about the neat handwriting made him pause. He tucked it into his shirt pocket instead, and he handed it to investigators the next morning. News crews gathered outside Apex Velocity main office within hours. Reporters shouted questions about the crash, about safety failures, about who was really responsible. Victoria refused to answer at first. She locked herself in her office, scrolling through page after page of old engineering logs, searching desperately for an explanation. Shaken, Victoria dug through her late father's private archive that night. Using a guard's code provided by Winston, she opened an old safe hidden in Arthur's former office. Inside sat the first patent filing for the Apex Pulse algorithm. The listed inventor was one name only, Isaiah Brooks. Beside it lay a forged transfer agreement, signed with Marcus Vance's handwriting, attempting to claim the technology as his own. Victoria stared at the papers for a long time, her hands shaking. She had fired, humiliated, and nearly destroyed the one man who built the soul of her entire company. Victoria right away fired Marcus Vance and called the police to seal off his office. But before officers arrived, Marcus managed to trigger a full clear of the project's central servers. Without Isaiah's personal secret code, the ZX-9 system could not be restarted at all. At 5:45 p.m., a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up outside a rundown apartment building in Gaston. Victoria stepped out, her costly suit now wrinkled and dusty from the long drive. She climbed the narrow, musty stairwell and knocked on the door of apartment 4B. Isaiah opened the door holding a small screwdriver, still fixing one of Ruby's toys. He looked at Victoria, without a trace of surprise. "I'm sorry, Isaiah," Victoria said, her voice shaking with shame. "I was wrong about it all. I'm begging you to come back and save Apex, to save my father's life's work." Isaiah looked straight into her eyes. His tone stayed calm but firm. "When you insulted the color of my skin," he said, "when you called me an uneducated laborer, you weren't thinking about your father's life's work. I won't trade my self-worth for your money." He closed the door in a soft way, but firmly, leaving Victoria standing alone in the rain. Victoria did not leave, though. She stood outside Isaiah's door for nearly an hour, rain soaking through her jacket. She did not knock again. She simply waited, staring at the cracked concrete steps beneath her feet. Inside, Ruby tugged gently on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, she looks like the lady in that photo," Ruby said. "The one on your desk with Uncle Arthur." Isaiah paused. He did not forget the old photograph, taken years ago at a company picnic. Arthur stood in the middle, laughing, with a much younger Victoria on one side. Isaiah let out a long, tired sigh and opened the door once more. Victoria knelt down to Ruby's eye level, her costly suit now soaked and forgotten. She reached into her bag and pulled out two folded papers. One was Arthur's first patent filing. The other was a draft appointment letter. "I'm not asking you to save me," Victoria said, looking up at Isaiah. "I'm asking you to save drivers like Leo. This is the Chief Technology Officer position at Apex Velocity. 30% owning it. Final say on every safety choice. Nobody above you again. Not ever." Isaiah studied her face with care. The pride he did not forget from that office was gone fully. In its place was something raw and honest, something that looked a lot like real regret. "Okay," Isaiah said in a soft way. "For Leo, for every driver who trusts that car with their life." They drove back to the speedway together that same night, arriving just before 8 p.m. Police officers held Marcus Vance in the engineering control room, waiting to take him in for questioning. His hands shook as he watched Isaiah walk past him without a single glance. Isaiah sat down at the main control terminal, cracking his knuckles out of old habit. He plugged Arthur's hard drive into the system and began typing a long recovery code, 64 characters he had memorized years ago and never forgot. Line by line, the safety filter came back to life inside the ZX-9's core system. The engine roared awake on the test stand, steady and strong. Every monitor in the room flashed green, showing 100% safety proof across every system. Marcus lowered his head as officers led him away in handcuffs at last. They charged him with wrecking things on purpose and putting lives at risk. Victoria watched Isaiah work with quiet awe. For the first time in years, she knew just what her father had always tried to teach her. Real value could never be measured by a diploma hanging on a wall. 2 weeks later, Apex Velocity held a real demo for news people and investors from around the world. Isaiah Brooks watched, over every step, now the company's new chief technology officer. The rebuilt ZX-9 ran 50 laps in a row. Not one warning light ever turned on. That day, the car set a brand new track record at Charlotte Motor Speedway. The $500 million deal with Vanguard Automotive was signed, and it worked, this time with one firm condition. Every future safety test at Apex Velocity would require final approval from Isaiah Brooks alone. The final scene unfolds inside Isaiah's new office at Apex Velocity main office. Sunlight pours through wide windows onto shelves lined with machine-made tools instead of costly artwork. Engine blueprints cover one wall. In the corner sits a small play area built just for Ruby. Victoria walks in softly, carrying a warm cup of coffee she made herself. She sets it gently on Isaiah's desk and smiles, a smile built on real respect between equals now. Isaiah looks over at Ruby, laughing as she plays with her newest toy car. At last, he understands that his talent and his self-worth have found their rightful place under the Charlotte sun. Leo visits the office often now, still wearing a small bandage on his healing hand. He calls Isaiah boss, with a grin, though Isaiah always waves the word away. Winston comes by every Friday later, that day, parking his wheelchair near the window, where the later, that day light hits just right. He says it feels closer to Arthur that way. Isaiah started something new inside the company that fall. He built a training program for young mechanics, from neighborhoods just like Gaston. He wanted kids who loved engines, but never had the money for a fancy degree. He taught them the same way Arthur once taught him, patiently and without judging where they came from. Word spread quickly through the old neighborhood. People who once saw Isaiah only as the quiet man who fixed broken pipes now saw something else entirely. They saw proof that talent does not care about zip codes or bank accounts. Victoria changed too, in quieter ways no one announced publicly. She started sitting in on Isaiah's training sessions, taking notes like a student instead of a boss. Slowly, she learned to listen more than she spoke. At home, on plain evenings, Isaiah still cooked eggs and toast for Ruby every morning. He still tucked her in at night and skipped the creaky step on his way downstairs, even though his new apartment did not have one. Old habits, it turned out, were hard to let go of, and some habits were worth keeping forever. Some mornings, Ruby asked to hold the toy helicopter while he cooked, humming in a soft way to herself. Isaiah always let her. Those small, plain moments meant more to him than any title on an office door. The engine that almost took a young man's life became the very thing that gave a whole community new hope. And in that tall glass building in Charlotte, self-worth sat, at last, just where it belonged.